Vinieron los mercenarios por el único camino, la ensenada de cochinos extraordinarios. Por allí vinieron, pero allí quedaron. Por allí vinieron los pobres, pero allí quedaron.
Olá, sejam bem-vindos e bem-vindas a mais este evento do 6º Salão do Livro Político, que ocorre de 24 de setembro a 3 de outubro de 2021. Eu sou Haroldo Cerávulo Cereza, um dos organizadores do Salão. Com o tema Livros que Gritam, o Salão do Livro Político conta com a participação de 68 editoras independentes e é uma realização das editoras Boitempo, Autonomia Literária, Anita Garibaldi e Alameda, e também da PUC São Paulo. Cursos, mesas redondas e entrevistas com autores fundamentais na defesa de uma sociedade mais justa fazem parte da nossa programação. Ela está disponível no endereço salãodolivropolitico.com.br. Também neste endereço, você encontra a lista das editoras participantes e uma seleção de títulos com descontos de 20% a 50%. São livros que gritam por democracia e justiça social, contra o fascismo e a ultradireita. Os descontos estão nos sites da própria editora, das editoras participantes, já atribuídos no valor dos livros ou através de um cupom com o nome VI Salão. 6º Salão, tudo em letra maiúscula. Esperamos que vocês gostem do debate, se inscrevam no canal do Salão no YouTube e difundam livros e vídeos para um mundo melhor. As entrevistas do Salão foram gravadas para que a gente pudesse legendá-las antes delas irem ao ar. As mesas redondas e os cursos são ao vivo. Até mais, espero que vocês gostem do evento que começa agora. Obrigado.
Dear Jodi, after all, have to express my gratitude for your book. Your book came in a very good moment here for Brazilian left-wing activists, and it is a present, it is a gift for us in order to rethink our political bonds and our political way of doing things, because there are lots of uncomfortable people with the Brazilian political situation. There are lots of left-wing groups and parties, but the whole picture sounds like we need some kind of a change in our relationships, in the way we thought together, the way we make things together. There's something I would say wrong in the way left wing in Brazil is thinking itself in order to respond to this difficult situation with the right wing, the fascist, in power. So I would like if you can introduce our conversation with a picture, with the comparative picture of the left wing in America, in the Anglo-Saxon world, or the picture from where you thought and you write this particular book.
Great. Thanks so much, Christian. And it's really exciting to meet you. And I appreciate this opportunity to have the conversation. So I want to answer this in two ways. So first, I wrote Comrade as kind of at the end of the Obama administration, And yet it comes out right when, right around the time, right when Trump was elected, I think right when Trump was elected. So both of these things are kind of tangled together. And and the reason I say this is because of the relationship between the left and fascism in the US and how to compare that with Brazil, and then how the book fits in with that. So one of the things that I think became very clear in the US after Trump was elected was that the left was even blurrier than before. And blurry insofar as a whole bunch of liberals were now in the left.
In the left, yes.
And in the mainstream, which is completely right wing, presents liberals as the left. So in the mainstream discussion in the US, the Democratic Party is presented the left, which means that the left, the socialist left, the anarchist left, the communist left gets lumped in with this. And in right-wing rhetoric, which was which was pronounced under Obama, like Obama was called a communist. And even though, obviously, he's like Mr. Goldman Sachs guy, right? Like there was nothing communist about him, but it's part of the way that race is read as radical in the U.S. So Obama is dissed as a communist and dissed as a socialist, which also then adds to this general sense of everybody who's not a fascist is somehow a communist. Now, on the one hand, right, that can be very good for us on the left, right? It means that our names name the emancipatory horizon. They name what the struggle is ultimately about. That's good. However, within the left, we're all aware of all of our differences and divergences, and many of us hate each other for them. And this is now the problem. Like, how do we understand ourselves, cultivate ourselves, make ourselves into comrades who are those on the same side of the political struggle, rather than those who are always attacking one another for not being the best that we should be and for not being, ideologically proper and so on and so forth.
Yes. Even the signifier communist is back. That's good.
Yes, absolutely. That's good. Right. I mean, to my mind, what it signifies is something very powerful, because so it's like, what is it now? 20 years since the, collapse of the Soviet Union, and the right wing in Brazil, in the United States, and other places is going after communists. So they're still worried about it. And that's good for us. It's like, we have to make them more worried about it. We have to be the thing that they're worried about.
Yes. And we have this analogy because Lula is also called by the right wing in Brazil as a communist, and the history is completely retaken by the right wing. They say, for example, that the Nazi Party was left wing because it has the name
the word socialist in it.
Socialist.
Yeah.
So I don't know if in America you have this facility to revert history in a kind of a fairy tale and in a rhetoric that really produce anger and fear, as we have here in Brazil. I remember I was in New York when Trump was elected in Chinatown, in a bar, and people in a left-wing bar, and people they couldn't believe Trump happened. And one day after that, I've seen feminist demonstrations in the streets. So we felt left-wing is going to respond immediately. There's nothing in common in Brazil. Months after Bolsonaro was elected, the streets was empty. People with fear and rage, but no demonstrations. That sounds like, and here goes my question, how does feminist, anti-racist, new criticism connects with the old left, with the Trotskyists, with the Party, the Communist Party, and so on? Can you give us a picture of the relation between, I would say, old left and new left?
So sure, this will be a very general sketch here, and so we can say as a general description that in the late 1960s, early 1970s, the student movement and the women's movement, and starting a little earlier, the civil rights movement, and the at the time the language would have been gay liberation movement, that these became signs of a great deal of popular energy, and of course the anti-war movement. And in that setting, particularly now, if we go sort of more specific into the U.S., so the president is Richard Nixon at that time, and Nixon had the strategy of really trying to appeal more to workers, unions, and the working class, a silent majority, and white men, and to talk to these constituencies and these people to make them feel that the Republican Party represented them, and that all of these students, that the students were sort of privileged and wasting everybody's time, that they didn't know how good it was, that the feminists were out to, bust their balls, bust their men's balls, to take men's power away, and that they were falsely accusing them, that black people were a dangerous and criminal force, that people should be afraid of them, right? I mean, there were riots, and there were justifiable riots, but the Nixon administration was successfully able to demonize groups that were actually working on how to build alliances among each other. So there's this part going on. Now, at that time in the United States, I mean, I think it's fair to say that organized socialists were very weak, that they were pretty divided. Yes, there was a communist party. I mean, there still is a communist party, but the communist party, it does not have play a major role in the United States right now. But
the unions are decreasing since.
Unions have totally. Private sector unions are really small. I mean, I don't remember what the percentage is. Like between 9 and 11% of private sector workers. More public sector workers are unionized than private sector workers. Mm-hmm. So at any rate, so you have this on the one hand, this flourishing of social movements. They are not within, for the most part, they're not within the form of socialist or communist parties. The socialist and communist parties at that time are pretty fragmented. And then the Democratic Party, there's various struggles, around trying to get the Democratic Party to, like, I'm thinking of Jesse Jackson's Rainbow Coalition. There were also efforts to build a stronger third party. I mean, these efforts reappear historically at different times. But those were generally not successful. We don't have a parliamentary system in this it's like a winner take all system. So we just have two parties generally that compete. So against this background, then, what we have is a sense of movements that are struggling for their own goals. And they don't organize in terms of a party where the goals are universalizable. So it's not a primary view now these days this is changing, but where people would say, we are feminist, and so because we are feminist, we are anti-racist. Now feminists say that, right, the last 10 or 20 years. Mm-hmm. But in the 60s or 70s, that wasn't the first level of the message. Right. And it wasn't the case that, because we are fighting for, we are fighting against racism, we are fighting against homophobia. That was not the way the claim works. They weren't said in this. They were said in terms of, now the language is usually identity politics rather than a universalizing politics. Yeah. I would say that now, though, and I think it's been the last 10 years, and I would give credit to the Occupy Wall Street movement, Black Lives Matter, those coming together, the way that the environmental movement has really accepted leadership from Native Americans and indigenous people, the way that environmental movement has become completely concerned with racial justice, that we are now having much more of a convergence of these movements in the last 10 years. Over the last 10 years. And that, but is there still division? Are there still people who will criticize the movement, who will criticize these developments as if this were 20 years ago? Yes. And so it's not necessarily totally solid. People, particularly when people go in their individualist social media modes, then things break down. And so holding them together is like the crucial task, I think, so that they appear as one front in one struggle, like all on the same side against the capitalist enemy.
Yeah. There's a kind of a tension between particularism and identity politics as far as we can unificate this concept, and universalism. The old still have this confidence on universalism.
I guess what I want to say is that there's a new left or a new old left, or
just
that there's a return, that there's more conviction now over the last 10 years in the importance of a universalist position than there was. And that people are recognizing that we cannot have victories around racial justice and gender justice if we don't have victories for everyone. And we can't have these victories under capitalism. Now, I'll just be really frank. It might be that this is my view and the view of my party and the people that I read, but I actually feel like I'm seeing it more broadly elsewhere too. But it's what has to be cultivated and energized.
Yeah, it was pretty uncomfortable because I agree with, I sympathize with your position. But it goes with the diagnosis from Nancy Fraser, but also it goes with the diagnostic from Mark Lilla, for example, that we are not going to win no elections. Otherwise, we can make some kind of arrangement or a political alliance or things like that. And coming from the right wing. And I think your book is kind of a alternative to this massive diagnostics that we must be together to do something new, because you particularized the way we can be together in order to change things. It's not about, as far as I understand, comrade. It's about. It's not about other alliances. It's not about building instrumental alliances, but how we stay together.
So a couple of things. So first, I would say it's not about instrumental alliances, but it is about coming together to be an instrument. It's about putting aside one's individual preferences, one's individually oriented politics, in order to be the apparatus we need, not to win elections, you're right, but to essentially overthrow the state and win. It's actually, it's the only way it's the only way to build a revolutionary party. And so then when I talk about all of this all the universal stuff I was just saying about, anti-racism and gender politics, etc., that's the content, right? That's not saying I, Jodi Dean, white person, am allying with, my, Black friends over here. it means that the position of the party is that we must have a struggle that is universalizable for white women, Black people, around in gender and all of the different things. So that's the content. It's not telling us about who you work with. It's not about the identity.
Yes.
It's about the claims for equality.
Yes.
So the instrumentalization is the self. Oh, wait, is that your cat?
Yes.
Let's see if mine come in. No, it's great. It's the self instrumentalization, the coming together, out of the conviction that we will only win if we are together. And so then there's going to be, some people aren't going to want to come together. They're going to be like, no, I don't trust you. Your politics is too old left. And then it would be, okay, sometimes we ally.
Because this is signifier alliance. This is crucial for Brazilian renewed in politics, because the main diagnosis from the left against Lulopetism, the left wing we have in power here in Brazil for 12 years ago, since now, they may say you do excess of alliances. You make alliances with the entrepreneur. You make alliances with the hydroelectric builders. You make alliances with the worst, in politics to sustain governability. And now we have fascists in power because we do too much alliances, too much uncritical alliances.
Wait, I want to ask a question right there. So, is the argument that the fascists are in power because, let's say, people in the country rejected the opportunism of the alliances? Or is the argument, that the alliances strengthened the enemies because it gave them access to things they wouldn't have access to? So what's the problem? I mean, where's the knife?
The main problem is the PT were driven from left revolutionary party with the Trotskyisms and Stalinists and old-fashioned left wing. When it came to power, it make alliances and turn itself to a social democrat party. So, in order to maintain power, it suspends the connection with popular movements. It suspend connection with popular demands. And after 12 years, it came a kind of a counterattack using the old claims that the left was defending against monopolization of the media, against of ecological devastation. Lots of things was appropriated by the fascists in order to say, now we are going to make it. Now we are going to apply the platform of the left wing. You forget. But of course, in rhetorical way, and it's a discourse operation. It's false. We know it's false. But in politics, we have to understand how the ideology and the possibility is produced. And so there's a kind of a compromise between this alliance politics and the produce of fascism in Brazil. Then I stress that because your book is a kind of solution for that. It's a deep interpretation about what does it mean doing alliances. And in order to do better instrumental analysis alliances, we have to reinstall a kind of an ethos.
Yeah, you have to know, I think, what is the form of political connection and belonging that is our basis from which we make an alliance. Like, we need to be able to tell the difference.
Yeah.
And then if everything just feels like alliances, then everything just feels like opportunism and forms of self-interest. And then weirdly, now the left has become the right, right?
Yes, yes.
Just as the right takes over the left goals and rhetoric and ideology, the left ends up taking over right practices or a right-wing way of being, and that's what we have to defeat. Right, we've got to defeat forms of individualism in the left that makes us beat up each other and not understand what it is to be on the same side together.
So as I will stress your fourth thesis about truth. We have to go back to truth. It's simple as that. It's loud and clear, a kind of horizon to the left, and I like it very much because I agree completely. We lost the reflection about what is truth, what is a full event, what is the truth in history, even the old connection with science, science and ideology, playing out to say we lost it. We gave up. Can you please?
Oh, that's I think everything you're saying is complete. I mean, I agree. I think it's important. It makes me think as a way of getting into the answer. Back in 1998, I published a book called Aliens in America, and it was about UFOs and alien abduction and the way that competing notions of reality make something like democracy impossible. And that, in fact, it was that, and part of this was even though it was weirdly misread as a postmodern embrace of multiplicity, it was the opposite. I was trying to say that, look, we can't have a common politics if people have different notions of truth, right? Like that's a level of just impossibility. All you can have under those conditions is really civil war, right? Civil war is when there is not a common accepted notion of truth. And the left has too much become, I would say over the last 30 years, 40 years, enamored of, well, everyone has their own view. There's all these different kinds of, if there's your truth, that's what's true for you. And this is death to us, right?
Yes,
we can't just have, and we've seen some of that with the COVID, right? With not everything not everything is medically acceptable for dealing with COVID. Drinking bleach is not going to, cure someone from COVID. It might kill them. And there are other weird things on the American right now where they're encouraging people to take, I think, some sort of fertilizer or horse medicine that was supposed to help prevent COVID. And all of these things are lies. But when the left has been, or the postmodern version of whatever that is, left or right, is anti-science, we lose that kind of truth. We lose the fact that, wait a minute, science is a realm of debate. There's going to be probabilities. We can understand that. That is not something that means that there are 17 truths here. It means that there's a project of truth that we're engaged in and that scientists all participate in. And politically, we've lost the sense that there's a common politics, a truth that unites our politics, that animates our politics, and that this truth actually has to be a universal commitment to freedom and equality. It can't be that, well, some people just are okay with not being free. That's their choice. And it can't be the case that inequality is fine here. I mean, we've got to recognize these sort of political maxims as part of our truth. And I think for the left, it also means a truth to being with the people, to the struggle struggle of the people. And this is not the same thing as how the fascists use the people. It's not the same thing as a exclusive, exclusionary nationalist struggle, even though some forms of national struggle might be necessary. But that's not the same thing. And we have to be able to have these commitments that we hold on to for there even to be anything like a left that is capable of confronting the fascists. I mean, this is the thing that kills me. Like, people like to, in the US, anti-fascism is a popular name on the left, but many people won't go as far as say, okay, and that means like the ultimate anti-fascists have been the communists, and so I will embrace communist commitments. They only take the negative gesture rather than the positive commitment to a shared truth.
Yeah, but that means that there was something wrong with our critics on science. Since Bruno Latour, since all those guys, we like them. Feira and so on. We are in a kind of a deadlock, because if we stay in this so relativistic critic on science, we now have to admit, as a Gambling, as a pure left-wing thinker defending vaccines, maybe not so good. You have to contemporize with vaccination and so on. There's a task here, I think, a clear task for us to rethink critics on science, critics on discourse, for example.
I think part of the issue is as we rethink those critiques. I'm with you on that. Part of it is upholding the Marxism more and saying the critique of capitalist science, the critique of state science, the critique of how science has been funded and manipulated in ways that support particular kinds of power.
And so science and so on.
Yes, exactly. It's racialized science, and there's really great feminist discussions of science that talk about the ways that women's bodies and women's maternities are conceptualized under patriarchal science. So the thing, though, is to be able to present this, I think, as a more holistically than fragmented into racist science, sexist science, and saying, the institutions through which science have been carried out have had these limits to them that have to be overcome. But this doesn't mean that, let's say, all of the discoveries of black holes and gravitational waves are sexist and racist, right? And I think that that's where some of the critiques end up going as they get popularized with like all science is racist, rather than let's look at the racist manipulation of science. So, but you have to believe in some kind of truth to be able to make that argument, rather than, well, all science is this, then it's just going to be, a perpetually slippery chain of non-signification. And then at the same time, then one other thing, you mentioned something earlier. Did you say something about a pure left? Did you use that? I want to think about that and I think we're never going to be pure.
Yes,
right?
I agree.
We can't be, and in power.
But
power's going to. Yeah, sorry.
There's a kind of a purification narrative in the left wing.
Yeah.
It's a kind of a moral search of purification, of excellency in life, excellence in consuming choices. It's a kind of effect of left-wing orientation in the individual form of life. I want to hear something from you about this narrative of being a proper revolutionary, the unique fellow or women as a kind of moral hierarchy.
Yeah, that's great. I think you're absolutely right. It's moralistic. It's part of the shift away from thinking politically to thinking in moral terms, and to making moral judgments rather than political judgments, to restrict. Essentially, I guess I want to say that the left, we could say since 1991, so I want to use that as a mark at the end of the Soviet Union, but you could go earlier. I'm not worried about the periodization exactly. But the left has replaced politics with moralism. I mean, we could even use Carl Schmitt and say we have ethics and economics, right? A kind of moralism plus this sort of very intense kinds of economic reasoning. Well, all of my moral choices will be manifest in my economic choices. I'm a good person, so I buy fair trade, or I'm a good person, so I won't buy foie gras or caviar or anything that tortures animals, something like that. So it's this moralism is a symptom of the loss of a political space, a set of political tactics, a way of thinking politically. And then this means critiques of leaders tend to be, they made bad tactical choices, so they're not on my side. Now, it can be the case that an accumulation of bad tactical choices lead to that, right? But it's not always the case that bad tactical choices under awful constraints condition means that the person's not our comrade, or that they are malevolent or immoral. It can be the reality of a political situation. And then you reassess and like, doggone, that sucked. We should have done something else. But thinking moralistically then personalizes it. It individualizes it. It says it's a matter of your ethical character, rather than a matter of what are our goals, what are the objective constellation of forces on the ground, how can we reach them, and what does it mean to try? And it's that tactical thinking that too much of this identity-based politics has erased, and it's erased and let it then be replaced by moralism. I want to say one last thing. You talk about this excellence in life stuff. I think I have two responses to that. On the one hand, it seems like it's just kind of like part of influencer social media culture. Like, I can live like the richest people. I can be the most excellent. And then this also sounds like Aristotle, right? Like how, what is the excellence of this person? What is the excellence of the citizen? What is the excellence of, the good man? And so then you really see the deep set conservatism of it, right? It's an aristocratic view. So it's not just individualistic, right? Because you can have it's an aristocratic conservatism that's so deeply, part of this excellence.
Yes. Because I was discussing your book with friends, and one of them who did not read your book actually. No, this is moralization. We don't must talk about. We must give up psychological things like being comrade. And I said, no, you're crazy. You're crazy, because the book is a criticism on a moral orientation and politics. It's in favor of getting back conflict inside us in the sense of inside the individual, and sharing conflicts with the guys or women we work with. So it's about bringing conflict into our relationships or into our bonds in order to make politics, not destroying bonds, but making them strong by reinforcing the conflict. Because I think the psychological norms, if we are going to talk about relations, we are going to talk about identification and love and everyone together in the same whole speak. This is dying. This is killing a left wing.
Yeah, this is why I try in the book to make these distinctions between comrades and friends, right? So friends are, they're usually we have a limited number of friends. We can appeal again to Aristotle or Derrida here as they talk about why we have a limited number of friends, and we look out for the excellence of our friends, and every personal aspect of one another matters in friendship. We have to maybe spend time dealing with all sorts of feelings, like that's a friendship relation, and our friends should be able to expect that from us. And then comrade, but comrade's not that. Comrade is not about, your special specificity. It's not about how are you feeling right now. It's about getting the work done. And so you might, if we have to talk about your feelings to get the work done, okay. But if you can, just repress this and talk to somebody else about it, even better. But
yes.
What matters is our task. And so comrade's also not the same as our relatives. It's not a kinship relation. I mean, if anybody's ever, sat at a big family gathering and everybody's yelling at each other, your uncle has terrible politics and, the young ones have wild politics. But those aren't comrade relations. People might really be on different political sides at that same table. And so we should not confuse the fact that we will eat with a group of people with our form of political belonging and political sidedness. Those are two different kinds of things. Politically, we have to agree on the things that we are fighting for if we're comrades, right? We have to know who our enemy is, and we have to be willing to accept one another's leadership and guidance as we go, as we engage in the struggle. So comrades and family aren't the same thing. And then comrades and neighbors aren't the same thing, right? You would never say, I love my comrade as myself, because that's crazy. Because you're not, around being a comrade, it's not about loving yourself. It's actually about putting aside your own self-desire for the sake of revolution. For the sake of the necessity of political struggle right now. And then comrades aren't the same as citizens, right? Citizens is an abstract relation mediated by the state. And comradeship can cut through, so we can have forms of international comradeship and international solidarity, which makes many governments quite nervous about comrades. I want to add one more thing. I was thinking about this with your friend in the argument at the dinner table. Or maybe coffee. I don't remember what you all were ingesting. Doesn't matter. This? I think maybe the suspected moralism that they might have thought that they heard could be because of the discipline that comradeship requires. And on the left, we have lost the orientation towards political discipline. We admire people who are disciplined and go work out, or they're disciplined about their food or something like that. But many on the left tend to be very skeptical about something like party discipline. They seem to think that means you're erasing your mind and you're that you're just that someone else is ordering you around rather than that you're agreeing with a group to become strong by following a common project or pursuing a common line. So I think that thinking politically about discipline should replace this moralism that's thinking morally about sort of individuals' ethical choices on the left. That will be stronger if we start thinking about forms of collective discipline.
Yes, this and the argument is in a second level. Was saying this is psychologization of politics. And I was saying, no, she's a kind of Lacanian. She's dealing with Zizek and Badiou. It's the opposite. It's the critics of psychology. It's anti-psychology. but this is difficult to the public that doesn't deal with psychoanalysis and things like that, to understand how we have psychology and internal critics of psychology in order to do better politics. They act in the same narrative or the same discourse.
And that's why it's absolutely crucial that we as Lacanians also keep the Lacanian flag waving, so that this bringing of psychoanalytic insight isn't reduced to psychologism. Because psychoanalysis is not comforting. It's not supposed to be, right? It's this. I mean, I think of it as this kind of really necessary kind of alienation, this really necessary kind of gap, right? This necessary, necessary kind of abstraction that is actually liberating. That when we can be free from just being absorbed in the identities given to us by capitalism and the state and the people around us. We can be free from all these expectations by saying, I'm not identical to this, right? By saying that there is a gap, by recognizing that, that there's a gap in both of us, and that these gaps are actually these spaces where a lot of stuff happens, and that can be, spaces of politics, of freedom, of struggle. And it's anti-psychology. It's not about self-help. It's about actually freeing up people to say, okay, we don't have to do self-help when we're doing political work.
Mm-hmm. And that's why precisely your book, and I want your opinion about this, is a kind of an antidote to resentment. Because we are talking a lot about resentment in Brazil, because people are changing political views, and there are crashes in the families because left people and right people are fighting, literally. And we talk a lot about resentment as a political feeling or a political effect that we have to cross in order to change the situation. And do you agree with this? Your book is kind of an antidote against resentment, and why?
So I want to hear more about. I want to know resentment of whom, and for what? Are we talking about resentment in the left or within a broad left, or something different?
Something that is reversal from left and right, a kind of pathos. That's unified in some sense Brazilian political discussion around you are betraying me. You promise and you don't pay your promise. They. Under determinate discourse, it's betraying the cause of left, the cause of liberals, the cause of right, the cause of universities, the cause of arts. The whole country is discussing this kind of how can I explain? Historical resentments as race resentment, class resentment, gender resentment, and turning real proper social conflicts in moral psychological resentment.
Wow. Yeah. Okay. So I actually would hope that this book would help in this conversation, but I'm not sure. But I think what some of the ways that it could help is by breaking up these holes, so that it's not when we think politically, it's not everybody. Right? It's not that everybody is connected to everybody in these same sets of relations. And as I put it in the book, anyone but not everyone can be a comrade. So some betrayals might like so that gives us at least a way of start making some categorizations to say these boxes, I'm not in. These boxes I am in. So like if we don't have to worry. Like I don't worry about I don't know, people who thought that Trump was going to help them have more money or something like that, and they were rich people already, and then he betrayed them. Something like that. Like that doesn't matter. I'm not trying to trivialize. I'm just trying to find a example. So, but the idea would be is that if we want to address things politically, we shouldn't think as a whole, like everybody. We shouldn't think of all citizens, because there's a struggle in society about the kind of society we want. And not everybody is on the same side of that struggle. And so you've got to start taking sides rather than engaging in a generalized moralism or being swept away within a generalized morality or moral feeling or a kind of structural feeling. That'd be the first. Does that fit, do you think?
Yes, it's precisely that. Taking sides means confronting interests, confronting utopias, confronting ways of producing future. But doesn't mean you must be my enemy, because resentment turns the other side into an enemy.
But sometimes there are enemies. I mean, I think sometimes there are enemies, right? Like
not all.
It's not always the case, but I mean, fascists are real, and fascists are enemies, and so I think part of it is like, if I put this into U.S. terms, one of the challenges around let's say that's captured in the current discussion around settler colonialism is being able to say, yes, the United States was based on genocide and slavery, and these have done irreparable harms. And part of the struggle for a just world, as part of the struggle for communism, is acknowledging those harms, recognizing that in some way they may never be redressed, but that we must always try to redress them, rather than repress them or say that because of them, we cannot ever be on the same political side. And so I think that this helps try to acknowledge the harm. You could say it would maybe, but for us, that language is not quite betrayal. It was like the promise was not completely made. It was like you began as slaves or exterminated.
Yeah. Because I was thinking in that old book of Plutarch, how to choose your enemies. You're not choosing enemies. Of course we have enemies, but we have to think, we have to have some strategy. It's politics. Defining who precisely is your enemy, because in the resentment landscape, everyone that doesn't agree with you turns into an enemy, and this is killing us.
It's this, I think, in the U.S. with the Hillary Clinton campaign, when she used the word deplorables to describe Trump supporters, it was heard as a description of all conservative people. And then it was heard as a description of everyone in the white working class. And this becomes then impossible to bridge. And it becomes terrible for a left that can't organize the working class, because they are so apart from the working class that they can only see white workers. They can't see that the fact that the working class is diverse, and they fall into this rhetoric, a right-wing way of thinking. So I think that it's finding ways to choose your enemies, to know your side, is really part of the political challenge. But even knowing that we have to do that, rather than knowing that we have to do that, is also, I think, an important step forward.
Thank you. One last question, because we are going to close the window time. I'm writing some stuff about the left, which doesn't hate money. because here left means you must hate money. You don't want money. You have to be poor in order to stay in the left. You are betraying the left. You are false left because you have money and you sympathize with the left wing ideas. Can you say something about this?
Yes, it's moralistic and it's purist. And it's, I mean, from my perspective, it's anti-Marxist, right? The class struggle was not about making everybody poor. Class struggle is about being able to be paid for your work, owning your own work, being able to control and help steer your work democratically with other people, right? It's not about a race to who can show the most sacrificial version of themselves. Yeah. And what's really bad is to say this under conditions where everybody's living under capitalism. Like, what? You're supposed to starve? You're supposed to not have an apartment? You're supposed to not be able to, support the people in your household? Come on, right? That kind of, I think it's an excuse. I think it's a displacement of the person's own political failure, right? They feel like a political failure, and rather than confronting it, they displace it onto someone else that they're trying to guilt into being impure when there's no purity, and there's really no purity under capitalism. And I think your book sounds essential. We got to get rid of this kind of, it's death to the left. It's like a left that says you can only suffer. Like, come on, that's what Christianity is supposed to tell you.
Yeah, agree. Thank you, Jodi.
Oh, this was really fun. Thank you so much for your blurb for the book and for the conversation. I've really enjoyed it.
I really enjoy. I would say, Comrade Jodi, together.
Thank you, Comrade Christian. Take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.